An emotional story of redemption, love, passion, and new beginnings. She was a cleaner whose life was etched with struggle and the burden of a sick family. He, a ruined millionaire, on the run from a betrayal that had utterly destroyed him. Their paths converged in an abandoned building, and what began as sheer panic soon transformed into a desperate fight for survival and an improbable love. In this romance, where the line between protector and pursued blurs, the truth is the only key to freedom, but also the greatest threat. Follow this story to its very end. You'll be amazed by what unfolds. If you love stories of love and romance, make sure to subscribe to this channel and leave your comments. We post videos like this every day. Now, let's continue. Rain hammered against the windows of the abandoned commercial building in downtown New York City, creating a melancholic symphony that echoed through the empty corridors. Sofia Rodriguez adjusted the bucket of dirty water beside her and sighed, observing the distorted reflection of her tired face on the freshly waxed floor. At 23, her hands already bore the marks of countless hours of labor, yet her eyes still held a luminosity that even adversity couldn't extinguish. 3 more floors and I can go home, she murmured to herself, mentally calculating how much longer she'd need to finish cleaning. Her mother, Helena, was waiting at home, dependent on the expensive medication Sofia struggled to afford every month. It was always a race against time, a silent battle between accumulating bills and the few dollars she managed to scrape together, working in 3 different buildings. Sofia knew no luxury, no ease. Her life was a series of small daily sacrifices and big dreams carefully tucked away in her heart. There had never been time for dates, for parties, or for the experiences other young women her age enjoyed. Every free moment was dedicated to caring for her mother or to the tireless work that kept her on her feet. Meanwhile, on the 22nd floor of the same building, Victor Sterling remained motionless before the panoramic window of his old office. Or rather, what was left of it. Walls once adorned with expensive paintings now displayed only dark smudges where the artworks used to hang. The man who once commanded a financial empire worth millions of dollars now hid like a ghost in his own territory. At 35, Victor had lost everything in a brutal sequence of events that still haunted him. It hadn't been crime, it hadn't been incompetence. It had been worse, the betrayal of those he trusted most. His own family, his closest partners, had taken advantage of his vulnerability during a devastating mental health crisis to usurp his empire piece by piece. The panic attacks, the profound depression that paralyzed him for days on end, the paranoia that made him question every shadow, all of it had been used against him. While he struggled to stay sane, they rewrote contracts, transferred assets, and spread rumors about his supposed instability. By the time he finally recovered enough to realize what was happening, it was already too late. Now, Victor lived reclusively on that abandoned floor, one of the few assets they hadn't managed to seize from him yet. His beard had grown wild, his eyes held an animalistic wariness, and every sound made him jump. The man who was once respected and feared in the business world now subsisted on leftover delivery food and anxiety medication. The storm outside seemed to mirror Victor's internal chaos. He paced back and forth, whispering to himself, mentally revisiting every moment of the betrayal, every forged document, every lie that had destroyed his reputation. Paranoia whispered in his ears that they would come for him, that they would discover his hiding place, that they would finish the work they had started. That's when he heard it. A sound distinct from the wind and rain. Footsteps. Someone was in the building. Victor felt his heart pound. They had found him. His enemies had finally discovered his hiding place. With trembling movements, he approached the door, trying to control his accelerated breathing. The sound of footsteps grew nearer, accompanied by the dragging of something heavy across the floor. On the other side of the door, Sophia was struggling up the stairs, pulling her cleaning cart. She didn't know that floor had been abandoned for months. She didn't know anyone was there. For her, it was just another level to clean, a few more. Hours of hard work ahead. When the door abruptly swung open, both were met with the unexpected. Sophia saw a disheveled man with wild eyes and crumpled clothes blocking her way. Victor saw a small young woman, her cleaning uniform drenched from the rain, holding a broom like an improvised weapon. For an instant, that seemed eternal. They stared at each other in silence. Sophia felt fear race down her spine, but she also noticed something more in the man's eyes, a profound pain, a vulnerability that contradicted his menacing appearance. Victor, in turn, saw something he hadn't expected to find: purity. Even scared, the young woman didn't run. There was an innocence. In her gaze, he thought no longer existed in the world. "Who are you?" Victor whispered, his voice hoarse from disuse. "What do you want from me?" Sophia swallowed hard, but found the courage to reply, I'm with the cleaning service. I didn't know anyone was here. And at that moment, beneath the storm-lashing New York City, two completely different worlds collided, initiating a story neither of them could have ever imagined. The tension in the air was palpable. Sophia kept the broom firm in her hands, her heart pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. Victor remained standing in the doorway, blocking her exit, but something in his posture had shifted. The initial aggression gave way to genuine confusion. "Cleaning," he repeated, his voice still suspicious. "There shouldn't be anyone here. This floor was abandoned." Sophia observed the man more closely. Despite his disheveled appearance, there was something in his features that betrayed an origin different from her own. His posture, even shaken, carried vestiges of authority. His clothes, though crumpled, were of fine fabric. And his eyes, there was a wounded intelligence there, like that of an injured animal. "I work for the cleaning company that takes care of the whole building," she explained, trying to keep her voice steady. "I didn't know anyone was here. I'm sorry if I disturbed you." Victor studied her face, searching for signs of lies, of a trap. But all he saw was sincerity. A sincerity he hadn't encountered in so long that he'd forgotten how to recognize it. Slowly, he backed away from the door, but not enough for her to pass. "How did you get here?" he asked, paranoia still controlling his words. "Who sent you?" "No one sent me," Sophia replied, beginning to feel a strange compassion for this clearly disturbed man. "I clean all the floors. It's my job." She then noticed the state of the room around him. The once luxurious office now looked like a scene of utter abandonment. Papers littered the floor, furniture was covered in dust, and there were remnants of food in takeout containers, and a smell, not exactly foul, but like someone who hadn't taken care of himself in a long time. "Do you live here?" Sophia asked, her compassion overriding her fear. The question hit Victor like a punch. Live? Was this living? He was merely existing, surviving, hiding like a rat in a hole. "That's none of your business," he muttered, but the defensiveness sounded more like shame than aggression. Sophia took a hesitant step toward him. "Are you okay? You look sick." And he was. Victor could feel the fever pounding in his temples, the result of days without eating properly and nights without sleep. His last anxiety attack had been particularly brutal, leaving him exhausted and disoriented. "I don't need your pity," he said, but his voice trembled slightly. "It's not pity," Sophia replied softly. "It's concern. You should get some help." Victor laughed, but it was a bitter, humorless sound. "Help? From whom? Everyone I knew abandoned or betrayed me. There's no one left." The words tumbled out before he could control them, revealing more than he intended. Sophia felt her heart clench. There was something in that man's solitude that echoed her own experience of carrying the world on her shoulders. "I'm sorry," she said, genuinely. "That must be incredibly difficult." The genuine compassion in her voice completely disarmed him. When was the last time someone had shown him real concern? When was the last time someone looked at him without judgment or self-interest? "You don't know me," Victor said, more to himself than to her. "You don't know who I am, what I've done." "I don't need to know," Sophia responded. "I just see someone who's hurting." The silence stretched between them, broken only by the sound of rain against the windows. Victor found himself studying her face, noticing the purity in her features, the absence of malice in her eyes. It was as if she were from another world, a world where people could still be good without ulterior motives. "You should leave," he said finally, but his voice no longer carried a threat. "This place isn't safe." "Why isn't it safe?" Sophia asked, genuinely curious. Victor hesitated. How could he explain that powerful men wanted to utterly destroy him? How could he talk about the paranoia that consumed him, about the constant fear of being discovered? "It just isn't," he murmured. Sophia looked around again, noticing the scattered papers, some torn photographs on the floor. There was a story there, a story of pain and loss that she didn't fully comprehend, but recognized on an instinctive level. "When was the last time you had a decent meal?" she asked, changing the subject. Victor blinked, confused by the question. I don't know. What does it matter?" "It matters a lot," Sophia said, and for the first time since they had met, she smiled slightly. "Wait here." Before he could protest, she hurried down the stairs, leaving Victor alone with his confused thoughts. Why had she asked about food? Why had she smiled? Why hadn't she run, screamed, called security? 15 minutes later, Sophia returned carrying an insulated lunchbox and a bottle of water. "My lunch," she explained, extending the container to him. "Rice, grilled chicken, and some mixed vegetables. Real food." Victor looked at the offering as if it were alien. "Why are you doing this?" "Because it's the right thing to do," Sophia answered simply, "and because you need it." In that moment, something broke inside Victor. The simple, selfless kindness of this woman, a complete stranger who had chosen to help him instead of flee, touched a part of his soul he thought was dead. But then the sound of footsteps in the corridor made them freeze. Male voices approaching. Victor felt panic explode in his chest. "They found me," he whispered, gripping Sophia's arm tightly. "You need to get out of here now." But it was too late. The voices were too close, and the only exit was blocked by those approaching. Victor looked at Sophia, seeing the fear in her eyes, and made a decision that would change everything. "Trust me," he said, pulling her deeper into the office and closing the door silently. "Just trust me." The office plunged into tense silence. Victor pressed his ear against the door, holding Sophia by the wrist with a force she knew would leave marks. Male voices echoed down the corridor, each word making his body flinch as if struck by electric shocks. "Are you sure he's in this building?" "Edward," said a deep voice, heavy with authority. "The contacts at the security firm confirmed activity on the 22nd floor." Another, younger voice replied, "Our dear Victor has always been predictable. Where else would he hide but in one of the last assets we haven't managed to seize yet?" Sophia felt Victor tremble as he heard the names. She didn't fully understand what was happening, but his genuine terror was unmistakable. Instinctively, she placed her free hand over his, offering the only comfort she could. "We'll search floor by floor," Edward continued. When we find that pathetic wretch, we'll finish what we started. No one can know. He's still alive to tell the truth." The words chilled Victor's blood. It wasn't just paranoia. They truly wanted to silence him permanently. He looked at Sophia, seeing the confusion and fear in her eyes, and felt an overwhelming guilt for having involved her in this situation. The footsteps receded, but Victor didn't relax. He knew Edward Sterling, his own cousin, too well, and knew he wouldn't give up easily. They would return. They would search more thoroughly. "Who are they?" Sophia whispered, her voice almost imperceptible. Victor released her, running his hands through his disheveled hair. "My family," he said, bitterness weighing in every word. "Or what's left of it." He began to pace back and forth like a caged animal. Sophia watched his movements, noting how he avoided passing near the windows, how he constantly checked the door, how his eyes never stopped moving. "They want to find me to silence me permanently," Victor continued, his voice hoarse. "They know I discovered the truth about what they did to me." Sophia felt a chill. "What truth?" Victor stopped pacing and looked at her, as if assessing whether he could trust her. There was something in those dark, pure eyes that disarmed him, something that made him want to open wounds he had sworn to keep closed. "Do you have family?" he asked, avoiding a direct answer. "I have my mother," Sophia replied without hesitation. "She's all I have in the world, and you'd do anything for her?" "Anything," Sophia confirmed, her voice laced with conviction. Victor nodded slowly. "I used to think that way too. I built a financial empire not out of greed, but because I wanted to provide security for everyone I loved. My family, my partners. They were everything to me." He moved closer to the window, staying in the shadows. "But when I fell ill, when depression and panic attacks left me vulnerable, they saw an opportunity, not to help me, but to take everything I had built." Sophia felt her heart clench as she listened. How could they do that? Forged documents, falsified signatures, declarations of mental incapacity, Victor enumerated, each word heavy with pain. While I was struggling not to kill myself, they were rewriting contracts and transferring assets. When I finally managed to pull myself out of that hole, I discovered I had nothing left. "But you can report them, sue them." Victor laughed bitterly. "With what proof? They control lawyers, judges, all the documentation. Officially, I transferred everything voluntarily during a period of mental instability. Who would believe the word of a man who had a mental breakdown against an entire family of respected people?" Sophia felt tears prick her eyes. The injustice of the situation was overwhelming. "So you hid here?" "It was the only place left," Victor said, his voice breaking slightly. "And now, not even this is safe." They stood in silence for a long moment, the weight of the revelation hanging in the air between them. Sophia observed the man before her, no longer the menacing stranger she had encountered, but someone who had lost everything and was fighting to survive. "You said your mother is all you have," Victor said suddenly. "Does she know where you are now?" Sophia hesitated. She knows I work late, but she doesn't know exactly where." "What if you didn't come home tonight?" The question made Sophia remember the reality outside. Helena waiting for her medication, for the bills that needed to be paid, for the daughter who was her only support. "She'd be desperate," Sophia admitted, her voice trembling. "She depends on me for everything." Victor saw the vulnerability she tried to hide, the heavy responsibility she carried on such young shoulders. "How old are you?" 23. "And you've never had time to live your own life?" Sophia lowered her eyes, a deep sadness settling over her expression. "There's no time for that when you're all someone has." My mother got sick when I was 16. Since then, it's just work, medication, bills. There's no room for anything. Elise, Victor felt something stir in his chest, a painful identification with this young woman who had sacrificed her youth for love. Don't you ever resent it? Every day, Sophia confessed, surprising herself with the honesty. But then I look at her, so fragile, so dependent, and I remember she's the only family I have. I can't abandon her. Even if it means never having dated, never having experienced. Sophia blushed, looking away. Those things aren't for people like me. I can't afford to dream of romance when there are bills to pay. Victor studied her face, noticing the purity that emanated from every gesture, every word. There was something in that innocence that touched him deeply, something that made him want to protect her from the cruel world he knew so well. "You deserve more," he said softly. "You deserve to be loved, cared for." "By whom?" Sophia asked, a sad smile playing on her lips. "Men like you don't look at women like me, and men in my situation, well, they have their own struggles too." The observation hit Victor like a slap. Men like me. Powerful, sophisticated. Even now, even lost, you still carry that air of someone who knew a world I'll never know. Victor opened his mouth to protest, but was interrupted by the sound of returning footsteps. This time, they were closer, more determined. "They're back," he whispered, panic instantly returning. "And this time, they won't give up easily." The footsteps approached. The office door, accompanied by low, deliberate voices. Victor felt cold sweat trickle down his back as he pulled Sophia into the darkest corner of the room, behind a dusty bookshelf. "Did you check this floor?" Edward asked, his voice now dangerously close. "Quickly," another man replied. "But we'll search everything again. He has to be here." Victor pressed Sophia against the wall, covering her with his body in a desperate attempt to hide her. She could feel his heart beating violently against her chest, could hear his ragged breathing. In her ear, his fear was so palpable that she began to tremble too. The doorknob slowly turned. "Shit," Victor whispered, looking around in desperation. "The window. We have to go out the window." "We're on the 22nd floor," Sophia whispered back, horrified. "There's a fire escape," he explained quickly. "Oh, dangerous, but it's our only chance." The door opened with a soft creak. Edward entered first, followed by two men Sophia didn't recognize. They began to search the office methodically, overturning furniture, checking every corner. Victor silently guided Sophia toward the window, but one of the men turned in their direction. For an eternal second, their eyes met through the gloom. "There!" the man shouted. Chaos erupted. Victor shoved Sophia toward the window, forcing it open as the men rushed toward them. Rain poured in violently, drenching them instantly. "Go!" he yelled, practically pushing her onto the narrow external fire escape. Sophia hesitated for a second, terrified by the height and the storm, but the urgency in Victor's voice made her move. She climbed out the window, clinging to the wet, slippery rails of the ladder. Victor followed her just as Edward reached the window. "You won't get away this time, dear cousin," he shouted, stretching out his arm to try and grab Victor. The fire escape was an old and poorly maintained structure. Under their combined weight and the force of the storm, it began to sway dangerously. Sophia descended as fast as she could, but her feet slipped on the wet steps. "Watch out!" Victor yelled, reaching out to steady her. At that moment, one of the bolts securing the fire escape to the wall snapped with a metallic ping. The entire structure tilted, sending them swinging precariously in the void. Sophia let out a cry of terror, clutching desperately to the railings. Victor quickly moved down to her, wrapping an arm around her while holding on with the other. "Look at me," he said, his voice steady despite the fear. "Don't look down, just look at me." Sophia locked her eyes on his, seeing a fierce determination there. In that moment, trapped in the storm, suspended in the open air, something fundamental shifted between them. It was no longer just a desperate man and a woman who had appeared at the wrong time. It was two people fighting to survive together. "We made it," Victor said, his voice hoarse. "But we have to get down now before the ladder gives way completely." They descended the remaining floors in tense silence, each step a small victory against death. When they finally touched the ground, both were trembling, not just from cold, but from adrenaline and the impact of what they had endured. Victor pulled Sophia into a dark alley between the buildings, away from the view of the windows above. She was soaked, shivering, her eyes wide with shock. Without thinking, he took off his jacket and wrapped it around her, pulling her close to his body in an attempt to warm her. "Are you okay?" he asked, his hands moving over her face, checking for injuries. Sophia nodded. But when she tried to speak, her legs gave out. Victor caught her before she fell, carrying her to a sheltered corner of the alley. The delayed reaction to trauma was setting in. She began to tremble violently, her teeth chattering. "Breathe," Victor said, holding her face between his hands. "You're safe now. Breathe with me." But Sophia was in shock. Her body wasn't responding. Her breathing was ragged, and she looked at him as if she didn't recognize him. "Sophia," he said, his voice soft but urgent. "Stay with me. Look at me." Gradually, she began to calm down, but still trembled uncontrollably. Victor realized she was entering hypothermia, her drenched clothes, the night temperature, the shock. He looked around desperately and saw a service entrance to the building's basement. "Let's get out of the rain," he said, carrying her to the most sheltered spot. In the abandoned basement, Victor found some dry cardboard boxes and old blankets left by homeless individuals. He improvised a shelter in the back, far from any entrance, and helped Sophia sit down. "You need to get out of those wet clothes," he said, practically commanding. "You'll catch pneumonia." Sophia looked at him, still in shock, and Victor noticed the absolute innocence in her eyes. She was terrified not only by what they had just endured, but by the forced intimacy of the situation. "I'll turn my back," he said gently, handing her one of the blankets. "Take off your top and pants. I'll do the same." With hesitant movements, Sophia obeyed. Victor kept his word, giving her privacy. But when she whimpered softly, trying to pull off her top with trembling hands, he couldn't ignore it. "Can I help?" he asked, his voice careful. Sophia nodded, unable to speak. Victor turned slowly, seeing her struggle with the wet buttons. With delicate, almost reverent movements, he helped her free herself from the drenched clothing, his eyes never leaving her face. When his hands brushed her bare skin on her shoulders to help with her top, both of them froze. The touch was electric, charged with an intimacy neither of them expected. Victor felt something clench in his chest. It wasn't just desire, but something much deeper and more dangerous. "You're—" he began, but didn't finish the sentence. Sophia looked at him, her eyes wide and vulnerable. No one has ever..." Victor understood immediately. The purity he had sensed in her was not just emotional. She was completely inexperienced, completely innocent. And there they were, half-dressed, depending on each other for survival. "I won't hurt you," he said, his voice raw. "Never." He wrapped her in the blanket, pulling her close to his body to share the warmth. Sophia snuggled against him, instinctively seeking security and warmth. Victor closed his eyes, fighting against sensations he hadn't felt in a long time. "Why did you save me up there?" Sophia asked, her voice muffled against his chest. "Because you didn't deserve to be involved in this," Victor replied. "And because you're the first person in a long time who looks at me like I'm human." They stayed like that for hours, listening to the sounds of the city above, knowing that dangerous men were searching for them. But in that moment, in the dark of the basement, sharing warmth and fear, something irrevocable had happened between them. When Sophia finally fell asleep in his arms, Victor realized the magnitude of what he had done. He had not only drawn her into his dangerous life, he had begun to fall in love with her, and that put them in far greater danger than Edward and his men could ever represent. Dawn broke grey and cold in the basement where Victor and Sophia had spent the night. She woke slowly, still nestled against his chest, feeling for the first time in her life the sensation of being protected in a man's arms. For a moment, she forgot where she was, how she had gotten there, allowing herself only to feel the warmth and security that emanated from him. Victor had been awake for hours, watching her sleep, fighting against the feelings growing in his chest. The faint light filtering through the small basement windows revealed the delicacy of her features, the vulnerability she carried even in sleep. He had never felt so protective of anyone. "My mother," Sophia murmured suddenly, sitting up abruptly. "She must be frantic. I've never spent a night out without telling her." The reality hit them like a splash of cold water. Victor stood, helping her dress in the clothes that had dried overnight. His hands trembled slightly as he touched her skin, and he realized that she also reacted to his touch in a way that made him question his own sanity. "You need to go home," he said, his voice rougher than he intended. "You need to get back to your normal life." "And you?" Sophia asked, noticing the pain in his eyes. "Are you going back to that office? They'll look for you again." "It's not your concern," Victor replied, but his voice lacked conviction. Sophia moved closer to him, her small hands touching his face with a tenderness that completely disarmed him. "You can't keep living like this, running, hiding." "And what do you suggest?" he asked, covering her hands with his. "That I confront men who have the power to destroy anyone who opposes them." "I suggest you don't give up," Sophia said, her voice firm. "I suggest you fight." Victor looked at her with a mix of admiration and despair. "You don't understand what you're saying. These people, they have no limits. If they find out you exist, that you help me, then we'll make sure they don't find out," Sophia said, surprising herself with her own courage. "We will," Victor repeated, incredulous. "You said you have proof somewhere, documents that can prove your innocence," Sophia continued. "Maybe it's time to stop hiding and start preparing to fight." Victor was silent for a long moment, studying her determined face. "You don't know what you're getting yourself into." "I know it's dangerous," Sophia admitted, "but I also know you don't deserve to live like a ghost for the rest of your life." 3 hours later, they were in Sophia's small apartment, in a modest neighborhood in the outer boroughs. Victor was shocked by the simplicity of the place: 2 tiny bedrooms, old but well-kept furniture, and the smell of medication that permeated the air. "Mom," Sophia called softly, entering the room where a fragile woman in her early 50s was lying down. "Sophia!" "My daughter, where were you?" Helena asked, her voice weak but filled with relief. "I was up all night." "I had a problem at work," Sophia lied, sitting on the edge of the bed. "But I'm fine, Mom. I brought someone for you to meet." Victor entered hesitantly, and Helena studied him with sharp eyes that contradicted her physical frailty. "Who is this young man, Sophia?" "He's a friend," Sophia said, blushing slightly. "He's going through some difficulties." Helena immediately noticed the way they looked at each other, the emotion-laden tension between them. "What kind of difficulties?" Victor found himself answering honestly. "Family issues, Ma'am. My family betrayed me." "Ah," Helena sighed. "Then you know the pain of betrayal. It's one of the worst pains there is." During the morning, Victor helped Sophia with household chores, preparing medication for Helena and tidying up the apartment. There was a domesticity in these gestures that both frightened and attracted him. For the first time in months, he felt useful, needed. "He likes you," Helena said to Sophia when Victor went out to buy bread. "Mom, please," Sophia murmured, but her heart raced. "And you like him too," her mother continued. "I can see it in your eyes. But be careful, my daughter. Men like him, they live in a different world than ours." When Victor returned, he found Sophia crying silently in the kitchen. "What happened?" "Nothing," she said, wiping her eyes quickly. "It's just, sometimes it's hard." Victor pulled her into his arms, and she allowed herself to be comforted. In that moment, both knew they had crossed an irreversible line. They were no longer just two strangers who had helped each other. Something real and profound was growing between them. It was then that the phone rang. Sophia answered, and her face instantly paled. "Hello?" "Sophia Rodriguez?" asked a cold male voice. "We know you're hiding someone who belongs to us." Victor snatched the phone from her hand, immediately recognizing Edward's voice. "How did you get this number?" "Oh dear cousin," Edward chuckled. "Did you really think you could hide behind a cleaning lady? We know everything about your little savior." "Leave her out of this," Victor growled. "I'm afraid it's too late." "For that," Edward replied. "You see, your new little friend has a very sick mother, doesn't she? It would be a shame if something happened to her medication supply, or if the cleaning company she works for found out she's involved with a mentally unstable man." Sophia felt her blood run cold. Victor clenched his fists, rage consuming his reason. "What do you want?" Victor asked through gritted teeth. "You know what I want," Edward said. "I want you to disappear permanently, and I want your little friend to forget you ever existed." "And if I don't agree?" "Then we'll make sure everyone knows Sophia Rodriguez is involved with a dangerous, unstable man. We'll make sure she loses her job, that her mother goes without medication, that she's seen as an accomplice to a man on the run from justice." Sophia grabbed Victor's arm, shaking her head. "Don't believe him." "Oh, and there's more," Edward continued, as if he could see them. "We have interesting photos of you two in the basement last night, photos that show compromising intimacy. It would be a shame if those photos reached her neighbors, her employers, the religious community her mother attends." Victor felt the world collapse. They had been watched, photographed. Sophia's purity, her reputation, everything would be destroyed because of him. "You have 48 hours, Edward said. "Either Victor disappears forever, or Sophia pays the price for protecting him." The call ended, leaving a heavy silence in the apartment. Victor looked at Sophia, seeing fear and determination battling in her eyes. "You're leaving," she said, her voice trembling. "You're going to leave the city, hide somewhere they can't find you." "No," Victor said, pulling her into his arms. "I won't let you pay for my choices." "Then what are we going to do?" Sophia asked, tears streaming down her face. Victor kissed her then, a desperate kiss laden with promises. When they separated, his eyes burned with a determination she hadn't seen before. "We're going to fight," he said, "but first we'll make sure you and your mother are safe. Because now, Sophia, you're not just a witness, you're my weakness, and they'll use that against us." The 48 hours seemed to have passed in seconds. Victor and Sophia had tried to develop a plan, but every possibility ran into the same cruel reality. Edward had unlimited resources and no scruples. They were sitting in the kitchen of the apartment, surrounded by papers and documents Victor had managed to retrieve from a safe in another building, when the door was violently thrown open. Edward entered accompanied by two men, one of them carrying a professional camera. Helena screamed from the bedroom, and Sophia instinctively stood to protect her mother, but one of the men stopped her. Punctuality was never your strong suit. Cousin, Edward said, smiling coldly, but don't worry, we took the liberty of accelerating the timeline. Leave them alone, Victor snarled, putting himself between Edward and Sophia. Your problem is with me. Ah, but that's where you're wrong, Edward replied, gesturing to the man with the camera. Our problem now is much bigger. The man began to film, and Edward adopted an official, almost theatrical posture. My name is Edward Sterling, a respected businessman from New York City. I am here to expose a situation that jeopardizes the safety of our community. Sophia felt her blood run cold. What are you doing? I'm saving our family's reputation, Edward continued for the camera. My cousin Victor Sterling, who everyone believed was receiving proper medical treatment, is actually evading his responsibilities and taking advantage of vulnerable women. That's a lie, Sophia screamed. Is it? Edward smiled cruelly. Then, how do you explain the photos we have of the two of you, alone in the basement, in compromising situations? He gestured to the second man, who spread several photographs across the table. Sophia saw the images and felt her world collapse. They were photos of her and Victor in the basement, taken with a powerful zoom through the small windows. The images, out of context, showed intimate moments, Victor helping her dress, them embracing, her sleeping in his arms. These photos will be sent to every resident in the neighborhood, Edward continued, still speaking to the camera. To Ms. Sophia's employers, to the religious congregation her mother attends, to every place she works. Helena appeared at the bedroom door, leaning against the wall. What is this disgrace, Sophia? What have you done? Mom, it's not what it looks like, Sophia pleaded, but tears were already streaming down her face. Oh, but it looks exactly what it is, Edward said. An innocent young woman being manipulated by an unstable man who uses her vulnerability to satisfy his desires. Victor lunged toward Edward, but was restrained by the two men. You damn bastard! Watch your language, cousin, Edward warned him. It's being recorded, along with your obvious emotional instability. Sophia looked at her mother, seeing the disappointment and shock in her eyes. Helena had raised her daughter with strict values, and now saw her only child exposed in a humiliating way. But we have a solution, Edward continued, smiling at the camera. If Victor agrees to return for proper medical treatment and permanently distances himself from this family, we can consider not releasing these images. Medical treatment? Sophia asked, confused. A specialized facility, Edward explained, where Victor will receive the care his mental condition requires, isolated, of course, without contact with the outside world. Victor understood immediately. It wasn't a clinic. It was a disguised prison. They wanted to commit him against his will, declaring him mentally incapacitated, so he could never tell the truth about what they had done. Never, Victor said, his voice raw with rage. Then the photos will be released tomorrow, Edward said, putting the images away. And Sofia Rodriguez will be known throughout the neighborhood as the woman who got involved with a dangerous and unstable man. Helena began to cry. Sophia, how could you do this to us? How could you bring such shame upon our home? Mom, please let me explain, Sophia begged. There's no explanation for this, Helena said, her voice breaking. You've ruined our reputation, our dignity. How will I be able to look our neighbors in the eye? How will I be able to go to church? Sophia felt her heart shatter. Her whole life had been dedicated to protecting and caring for her mother, and now she had brought humiliation and shame upon her. You have a simple choice, Victor, Edward said. Accept the treatment, and Sophia keeps her reputation, or you continue to be selfish and destroy an innocent family's life. Victor looked at Sophia, seeing the pain in her eyes, seeing how she blamed herself for everything. He realized Edward had calculated perfectly he would use Victor's growing love for Sophia against him. "He's not crazy," Sophia said, her voice desperate. "He was betrayed, tricked." "By his own family," Edward laughed. "How convenient." Delusions of persecution are classic symptoms of severe paranoia. "You know it's a lie," Victor said, but his voice lacked strength. "I know you're a sick man who's ruining innocent people's lives," Edward replied, "and this ends now." Helena approached Sophia. "You have to choose, my daughter. Either he leaves our lives or you leave mine." The words hit Sophia like a punch. "Mom, you can't." "I can, and I will," Helena said, her voice firm despite the tears. "I won't watch my daughter destroyed by a man who can't even take care of himself." Victor saw the absolute desperation on Sophia's face. She was being forced to choose between him and her sick mother, who was her only family. He knew there was no real choice. Sophia would never abandon Helena. "All right," Victor said, his voice broken. "I accept." "No!" Sophia screamed. "Don't do it!" "It's done," Edward said, satisfied. "The commitment papers are already prepared. You'll be transferred today." Victor approached Sophia, ignoring the men who watched him. "You always knew this was going to happen," he said softly. "We're from different worlds. You deserve a normal life, a normal family." "You are my family," Sophia cried. "You're what I want." "And I love you," Victor said, touching her face one last time. "That's why I'm doing this. That's why I'm setting you free." He turned to Edward. "But if you harm her in any way, if you so much as touch a hair on her head, I will escape from anywhere you put me, and I will come after you." "Empty threats from a mentally unstable man," Edward said, but there was a coldness in his eyes that showed he took the threat seriously. He said, men cuffed Victor, and he was led out of the apartment. Sophia tried to follow him, but her mother held her back. "Let him go," Helena said. "He's only brought us trouble." Sophia watched from the window as Victor was placed in a black car and driven away. When the vehicle disappeared into traffic, she felt as if a part of her soul had been torn out. "It's over," she whispered, her tears falling onto the windowsill. But it wasn't. Because in that moment, as she wept for the loss of the man she had learned to love, Sophia made a decision that would change everything. She wasn't going to give up on Victor. She wasn't going to let Edward win, even if it meant facing the most powerful man she knew all by herself. 3 days passed since Victor had been taken, and Sophia couldn't eat, sleep, or think of anything else. The apartment felt haunted by his absence, and every time she looked at the kitchen table, she saw the papers and documents he had left behind in the haste of his capture. Helena had locked herself in her bedroom, refusing to speak to her daughter. The silence between them was more painful than any shout. Sophia knew she had deeply disappointed her mother, but she also knew she couldn't simply accept Victor disappearing from her life. On the morning of the 4th day, she made a decision. "Mom," she said, knocking on the bedroom door, "I need to go out." "Where to?" came the muffled reply. "To find out the truth," Sophia responded, her voice firm for the first time in days. She had studied the papers Victor had left, trying to understand the complex financial world he inhabited. There were contracts, bank transfers, documents that seemed important, but which she couldn't fully comprehend. But there was one name that appeared repeatedly: Dr. Carmen Hayes, attorney at law. Sophia found the address of Dr. Hayes's office in downtown. The building was imposing, very different from anywhere she had ever been. When she arrived at the reception, she was met with wary glances because of her simple clothes and tired appearance. "I have an appointment with Dr. Hayes," Sophia lied to the receptionist. Your name? Sophia Rodriguez. It's about Victor Sterling. The mention of Victor's name caused an immediate reaction. The receptionist made a quick call, and minutes later, an elegant woman in her 50s appeared in the hall. Ms. Rodriguez? Dr. Hayes asked, studying Sophia with intelligent eyes. You said it's about Victor Sterling. Yes, Sophia replied, trying to keep her voice steady. I need to speak with you about him. The attorney led her to her office, closing the door carefully. How do you know Victor? Sophia hesitated, then decided on honesty. He was hiding in the building where I work. I found him. When was the last time you saw him? 4 days ago. Edward Sterling took him to a facility. Dr. Hayes's expression changed drastically. What facility? I don't know, Sophia admitted. He said it was for medical treatment, but Victor was scared. He said it was a disguised prison. The attorney stood abruptly, walking to the window. Ms. Rodriguez, I need you to tell me everything you know about Victor. Every detail. Sophia told the whole story, the encounter in the building, the escape, the night in the basement, Edward's blackmail. Dr. Hayes listened in silence, occasionally taking notes. You were photographed? The attorney asked. Yes, Sophia blushed. Edward said he'd release the photos if Victor didn't accept the treatment. Damn him, Dr. Hayes murmured. Ms. Rodriguez, do you have any idea who Victor really is? I know he had a company, that his family betrayed him. Victor Sterling was one of the most brilliant entrepreneurs of his generation, the attorney explained. He built an empire from scratch, always with impeccable ethics. When he fell ill, I warned him not to sign any documents without consulting me. He signed no. But Edward and the rest of the family forged documents. They created a narrative that Victor was mentally incapacitated, that he had signed transfers during psychotic breaks. Sophia felt rage surge in her chest. And why didn't you help him? Because Victor disappeared, Dr. Hayes said. When I tried to contact him, I was told he had been committed for treatment. When I tried to visit him, I found out the facility didn't exist. He had simply vanished. Until now, Sophia said. Until now, the attorney confirmed. Ms. Rodriguez, you might be the key to saving Victor, but you need to understand that you're getting into a war against very powerful people. I don't care, Sophia said, her voice firm. They used me to hurt him. They used my love for him against him. Dr. Hayes smiled for the first time. Love? You love him? Yes, Sophia admitted, tears returning. And I can't let him rot away in some awful place while I do nothing. Then let's get to work, the attorney said. But first, I need you to understand one thing. To save Victor, we're going to have to expose Edward publicly. That means your story will also be exposed. Sophia thought of her mother, of the shame this would bring, of the simple life she would lose forever. It doesn't matter, she finally said. He would do the same for me. Dr. Hayes spent the next few hours explaining the legal complexities of the case to Sophia. There was evidence of fraud, forged documents, illegal transfers, but everything was buried under layers of bureaucracy and corruption. We need a confession, the attorney explained. Someone from Edward's inner circle to confirm that the documents were forged. How do we get that? There's one person, Dr. Hayes said hesitantly. Marcia Sterling, Victor's sister. She was always jealous of him, but she isn't entirely evil. If we can convince her, where can I find her? Sophia, no, the attorney protested. That's dangerous. Marcia could tell Edward you're investigating. Then what do you suggest? Dr. Hayes thought for a moment. There's a charity gala tomorrow night. Marcia will be there. If you can manage to get to her... How? I don't have an invitation. I don't have suitable clothes. Leave that to me, the attorney said. But Sophia, you need to be aware that if Edward finds out what you're doing, he won't just commit Victor. He'll destroy you completely. Sophia thought of her mother at home, of the simple life she had always known, of the fear she felt. Then she thought of Victor, alone in some terrible place, paying for having had the courage to love her. It doesn't matter, she said. I'll do whatever it takes. That night, Sophia returned home to find Helena waiting in the living room, her eyes red from crying so much. "Daughter," her mother said, "I need to tell you something." Sophia sat beside her, bracing herself for more disappointment. "I received a call today," Helena continued, "from a woman who said she was a nurse from a facility. She said Victor was committed against his will, that he kept asking for you." Sophia felt her heart pound. What woman? What facility? She didn't say. But Sophia. Helena held her daughter's hands. "I made a mistake. I only saw the shame. I didn't see the love. This man, he truly loves you, doesn't he?" "Yes, Mom," Sophia cried, "and I love him too." "Then," Helena said, her voice firm, "we're going to bring him back." Sophia hugged her mother, feeling for the first time in days that she wasn't completely alone in this fight. But she still didn't know that, at that very moment, Edward was finding out about her visit to Dr. Hayes's office, and that he was already planning a response that would make the battle even more brutal. The phone rang on the attorney's desk, and a cold voice said, "Dr. Hayes, I believe we have a mutual problem. How about we talk tomorrow? I'm sure we can reach an agreement regarding your new client." The war had just begun. The hotel ballroom was filled with elegant people when Sophia arrived at the charity gala. Dr. Hayes had managed to get her a borrowed dress and a last-minute invitation, but Sophia still felt completely out of place in that world of luxury and sophistication. "Marcia Sterling is at table 7, the attorney whispered as they circulated through the room. Blonde hair, navy blue dress. Sophia located the woman immediately. Marcia had features similar to Victor's, but her eyes carried a hardness that contrasted with the vulnerability Sophia had seen in her brother. "Dr. Hayes," a familiar voice said behind them. Sophia turned and felt her blood run cold. Edward Sterling was there, impeccable in his tuxedo, smiling as if they were old friends. "Edward," the attorney replied coolly, "I didn't expect to see you here." "Oh, but I always support charitable causes," Edward said, his eyes fixing on Sophia. "And you too? What cause are you supporting tonight?" "Justice," Sophia replied, surprising herself with the firmness of her own voice. Edward chuckled. "How noble, but sometimes justice can be complicated, especially when it's based on the delusions of mentally unstable individuals." "Victor isn't mentally unstable," Sophia said, taking a step forward. "Isn't he?" Edward asked, taking an envelope from his pocket. "Then perhaps you can explain these." He spread photographs across the nearest table. Sophia saw the images and felt her world collapse. They were photos of Victor in a facility, seemingly sedated, looking utterly out of his mind. But there was something wrong with the photos. His eyes looked glazed over, not confused. "Drugging him," Dr. Hayes murmured. "You're medicating him against his will." "I am treating him," Edward corrected, "as any responsible family would." "Where is he?" Sophia demanded. "In a place where he's receiving the care he needs," Edward replied, "and where you can't hurt anyone else." It was then that Sophia heard a familiar voice. "He's never hurt anyone in his life." Marcia Sterling had approached, her eyes fixed on the photographs. "Edward, what are these photos?" "Nothing that should concern you," Edward said quickly, trying to gather the images. "No," Marcia said, picking up one of the photos. "These are recent. Where is my brother?" Sophia saw the opportunity. "He's being held against his will in a bogus clinic. Edward is using drugs to keep him sedated." "That's ridiculous," Edward protested, but there was nervousness in his voice. "Is it?" Marcia asked, studying the photos. "Because I recognize that place. It's the private clinic you use for your difficult employees." The blood drained from Edward's face. "Marcia, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly," Marcia said, her voice rising. "You didn't just steal our brother's company. Now you're torturing him." "He's crazy," Edward yelled, losing his composure. "He was going to destroy everything we built." "That you built by stealing from him," Marcia retorted. People around them began to turn to watch the argument. Sophia saw that it was now or never. "Marcia," she said, "you can help save him. You can confirm that Edward forged the documents." Marcia looked at Sophia, then at Edward, then at the photos of Victor. "Yes," she said finally. "I confirm it. Edward forged Victor's signature on all the transfer documents. I saw him do it." "You're insane," Edward hissed. "No one will believe you." "They'll believe me," a new voice said. Everyone turned to see a middle-aged man with a recorder in his hand. "Prosecutor Carl Reynolds," he identified himself. "And I've recorded this entire conversation." Edward realized he was cornered. His involuntary confessions, Marcia's confession, the compromising photographs, everything was crumbling. "Where is my brother?" Marcia demanded. "If you don't tell us," the prosecutor said, "I'll get a search warrant for every property you own." Edward looked like a cornered animal. "St. Raphael's Wellness Center," he mumbled, "in Westchester County." Sophia didn't wait any longer. She ran out of the ballroom, followed by Dr. Hayes and the prosecutor. The drive to the facility took an hour, each minute feeling like an eternity. When they arrived, they found Victor in a locked room, sedated but conscious. His eyes lit up when he saw Sophia. "You came," he whispered, his voice hoarse from the medication. "I always come," Sophia replied, holding his face. "I always will." 2 weeks later, Edward was in jail, facing charges of fraud, kidnapping, and false imprisonment. Victor's company was being recovered through legal proceedings, and his reputation was being restored. Sophia and Victor were at her apartment, where he had insisted on staying during his recovery. Helena had become his greatest advocate, treating him like the son she never had. "Are you sure this is what you want?" Victor asked, holding Sophia's hands. "My life will never be simple. There will always be complications, responsibilities." "I want you," Sophia replied, "no matter what comes with it." "And I want you," Victor said, kissing her softly. "I want to take care of you and your mother. I want to build a life with you, Dukishi. Even knowing I don't understand anything about your world. You taught me that there are things more important than my world," Victor said. "You taught me about true love, about kindness, about real strength." 6 months later, they got married in a simple ceremony, with Helena crying tears of joy in the front row. Victor had regained his company, but now he ran it with a different perspective, creating social programs and helping families in situations like Sophia's had been. "You changed my life," Victor said to Sophia on their wedding night. "You saved mine," Sophia responded. "No," Victor corrected her, pulling her closer. "We saved each other." And there, in each other's arms, they knew they had found something that neither betrayal, nor blackmail, nor class differences could destroy. A love that had been born of compassion, grown through adversity, and triumphed. Against all odds, love had won, as it always does when it's true.